And as I sit here in this creaky wooden cabin lit only by the flickering flame of an old lantern, my hands trembling and sweat dripping down my back despite the cold, I beg you to listen carefully because I cannot bear this truth alone anymore. 6 months ago, Ayan Kapoor, a marine biologist who never believed in ghosts or curses or ancient superstitions, was assigned to a research crew investigating a derelict cargo ship called the Valkyrie that mysteriously reappeared after vanishing 50 years ago near the Andaman Trench. And from the moment I set foot on that rusted deck covered in barnacles and silence, I felt it watching me, like the ship had eyes, like its metal carcass breathed with something old, something angry, something unsatisfied. But of course, I laughed it off because logic was my god, and science my religion. And even when our radio died 3 hours into the voyage and the clouds above twisted like a clenched fist in the sea, around us turned black like oil, I still refused to believe that we were entering a nightmare, until I heard the first voice, not through the wind, but inside my skull, a woman's voice, soft, broken, whispering in a language I didn't understand but felt deep in my bones, like grief or guilt. And when I turned to my teammate Karan to ask if he heard it too, his eyes were wide and blank like something had already crawled inside his soul. And then the power went out and darkness swallowed us whole. And I swear to you I could hear footsteps on the walls and ceiling. Not rats or echoes but heavy, deliberate boots dragging chains across metal. And that night, we all gathered in the control room, myself, Karan, our navigator Lara, the captain, Major Qureshi, the tech lead Vishal, and the youngest among us, a cheerful intern named Ria who tried to lighten the mood by singing old Bollywood songs even as the ship groaned like it was alive. But nothing could mask the stench that began to rise from below deck, like rotting meat and seawater. And when we opened the hatch to the cargo hold, we found not supplies but dozens of black wooden crates sealed with wax and marked in Sanskrit with words none of us could read, except Lara, who had studied ancient languages and went pale when she translated the inscription aloud. Do not open, bound by the hands of the drowned, cursed by the breath of the sea. But of course, being scientists, we were fools, so we opened one. Just one, and inside we didn't find gold or weapons or relics, but a single perfectly preserved corpse of a woman wearing an old naval uniform. Eyes closed, skin fresh, not decomposed, and when I leaned closer, her eyes snapped open and I screamed, stumbled back. But when the others looked again, she was still dead again, as if mocking me. And they said it was my imagination, that the low oxygen or pressure was messing with my brain. But that night, Ria disappeared, gone from her bunk with no signs of struggle except the blood-soaked blanket and the deep nail marks scratched into the walls. And the ship guard helped me. The ship began to move on its own, ignoring the helm, steering itself deeper into the Black Sea toward coordinates none of us had entered. And the stars above us began to fade one by one, like candles snuffed out, and Karan, once rational and bold, began chanting to himself in a voice not his own, repeating a name, Amara, 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 until his lips bled and he bit off his own tongue and died in front of us, choking on blood and teeth. And we found his journal filled with sketches of that same woman from the crate, her eyes hollow, her mouth open wide as if screaming silently. And Lara confessed to me that she'd been dreaming of the same woman every night, that in her dreams the ship was burning and Amara was walking through the flames, reaching for her, whispering that Lara had once betrayed her in a past life. And Vishal tried to send an SOS, but his laptop caught fire in his hands and his skin bubbled like wax, and Captain Qureshi locked himself in his cabin, raving about hearing the crew's screams from 50 years ago, begging us to forgive him for something he never explained before putting a bullet in his own head. And by then it was just Lara and me, broken, terrified, clinging to each other in the belly of a ship that was not dead but undead, sailing towards some forgotten doom beneath the waves. And yet, in those final days, when the cold was unbearable and hunger gnawed at us like rats, Lara and I found a strange comfort in each other's arms, whispering memories and wishes, and sometimes laughing softly as if pretending we weren't already ghosts. And we kissed beneath the failing lights, desperate and real, the only warmth left in that metal coffin. And she told me that she remembered a life before this one, that maybe we'd been lovers long ago and fate had brought us here to pay a price we'd forgotten. And I didn't believe her. Not fully, but I needed that story like I needed breath. And then one night, she vanished, too, not taken, not screaming, just gone, as if the ship had absorbed her and I was alone, utterly and completely alone, with the sea around me whispering the name Amara over and over in the sound of the waves and the groan of the metal and the creak of the floor. And finally the ship stopped moving, anchored itself above a point the maps called the mouth of drowning gods, and the water beneath us was not water but something darker, thicker, filled with shadows that moved and reached for me. And the crates below began to shake and crack, and the preserved corpses within began to twitch and moan and sing in unison, a lullaby I cannot forget, no matter how hard I try. And I ran, climbed to the highest point of the ship, screamed into the wind, begging for the storm to take me. And when lightning struck the mast, it knocked me unconscious, and I awoke days later on a beach half dead alone, with the ship nowhere in sight. And the only thing in my pocket was a locket I'd never seen before, with Lara's picture inside. And now you ask me why I can't sleep, why I flinch at every creak, why I keep checking the windows, why I burn every photo I take, because I know the sea has not forgotten me, because I see Amara's face in every mirror, because I still hear the lullaby, because I know the Valkyrie is not gone, only waiting, and one day it will come for me again. And ever since that day, I've lived like a man haunted not just by ghosts but by the weight of what I touched, what I loved, what I lost. Because Lara wasn't just a crewmate or a passing warmth in the cold sea of madness. She had become the last spark of humanity I clung to. And even now when I walk past mirrors or sleep with my back to the wall or refuse to close my eyes for too long, it isn't out of superstition but because sometimes when I blink, I see her standing at the foot of my bed, soaking wet, skin pale as moonlight, lips parted like she's trying to say something. Her eyes no longer the gentle brown I remember, but ink-black voids that pull me toward them like the sea did. And the worst part is I want to go. I want to be pulled back because guilt is a chain that no exorcism can break. And I know, I left her, and perhaps even worse, I survived when she didn't, and the world thinks I'm insane because the Coast Guard found me days later with a journal filled with drawings of corpses dancing in notes and languages no one understands and a body temperature so low they said I should have been dead. But I wasn't. I was cursed, marked, chosen, call it what you want, and even after therapy, medication, isolation, nothing stopped the dreams, because every time I drift into sleep, I am back on that cursed deck, hearing the clanging chains and that terrible lullaby humming beneath the floorboards. And I've started noticing strange things lately: salt water dripping from my ceiling, barnacles growing on the window glass, the scent of dead fish in my apartment with no source. And once, I swear, I coughed up seawater in the middle of a crowded metro and no one believed me until they saw the tiny crab crawl out from between my teeth. And now I know, the sea doesn't let go, not when it's claimed you, not when you've opened its secrets and broken its silence. And last night was the worst because I heard Lara's voice again, not in my head but in the room. Soft, close, wet, whispering, "Ion, you promised you'd never leave me." And when I turned, I saw her half beautiful, half docked seaweed tangled in her hair, her naval coat still clinging to her shoulders, water pooling beneath her feet on my hardwood floor. And she smiled. Oh God, she smiled. And I wanted to touch her, but I knew that if I did, I wouldn't come back. And just before she vanished, she said, "The Valkyrie is coming ashore." And now I don't know what's real, because when I went to the harbor this morning, Dock 17, the same number as the crate we opened on the ship, was cordoned off by police, and I overheard two officers talking about an abandoned freighter that drifted in overnight with no crew, no log, no engines, just silence. And when I asked what the name of the ship was, they said, Valkyrie. And my knees buckled, because that name should be at the bottom of the trench, rusted into dust, swallowed forever. But no, it's here, again, like it followed me, like I am its anchor to this world. And I don't know what to do, because if I ignore it, the dreams will get worse. And if I go back, I may not return. But maybe I don't deserve to. Maybe this is my punishment for opening what should have stayed shut, for desecrating the dead, for falling in love with someone whose fate was already written in. And yet, despite every warning, every trembling nerve in my body screaming for retreat, I found myself drawn like a moth to the cursed flame, standing once more at Dock 17 under the pale glow of sodium lights, flickering like dying stars, the fog rolling in thick and unnatural, heavy with the scent of brine and decay. And there it was, the Valkyrie idling above the water, like a monument to forgotten sins. The same battered hull, the same gaping shadows where the lights should be, yet now somehow larger, more alive, as if the ship had fed in the darkness and grown stronger, more sentient, more malicious. And I remember placing one foot on the ramp and feeling the breath of the sea exhale around me, warm, wet, whispering like a lover in my ear. And I stepped aboard, not with courage but surrender, like a man walking into his own grave. And the moment my soles touched that rusted metal, the world outside vanished, the harbor lights dimmed, the sounds of traffic dissolved, and all that remained was the groan of the Valkyrie's bones as she accepted me back into her cursed womb. And the deck beneath me pulsed like a heartbeat, as if the ship was alive, not metaphorically, not haunted in the traditional sense, but breathing, thinking, waiting. And I moved through the corridors I once knew, now warped by time and something darker. The walls slick with slime, the lights flickering not from faulty wiring but from the cold breath of unseen things crawling just beyond vision. And the whispering returned, not just Lara's voice now, but dozens, hundreds, all layered atop each other like waves, crashing, crying, laughing, pleading, singing in tongues lost to the surface world. And as I reached the old control room, I found the captain's log open, pages turning on their own, the ink writing itself, my name over and over, followed by a date that hadn't yet come. And I realized it wasn't a warning, it was a prophecy. My name etched into the ship's memory forever. And behind me, I heard the sound of bare feet on metal, slow, soft, wet, and a turned heart pounding, fists clenched hand. Saw her, Lara, exactly as I remembered, and yet impossibly changed. Her body no longer decaying but glowing faintly, her skin pale like moonlit porcelain, her eyes still the void I feared, and she smiled, not with cruelty but sorrow, and she spoke, her voice, both inside and outside me, saying, I waited, Ion. I waited where time doesn't exist, where memories rot, and you left me in the cold, and I fell to my knees, choking on apology, on guilt, on the unbearable weight of her pain, and she reached for me, not with hands but with memory. And I sought all our past lives, our love across lifetimes, ships and storms and betrayals, and every time I had failed her, every time I chose survival over faith, and she whispered, this is the last chance, Ion, bind yourself to me and we can break the cycle. And I knew then that this was never about ghosts or science or accidents at sea. This was fate's wheel turning again, offering me one final moment to choose love over fear. And so I stood, trembling, and took her hand, and the ship shuddered, howled, screamed as if in protest. And I felt the walls close in and the sea rise up like a furious god. But I held on, eyes locked with hers, and then suddenly all was calm, and we were standing not on the ship but beneath it, inside the sea, in a place where no light reached, where the drowned waited, their eyes like lanterns, their voices humming in unison. And Lara said, you must take my place to set us free. And though my soul resisted, my heart knew it was right, that I owed this not just to her, but to every soul chained to this floating prison. And I said yes, and as she kissed me sold sorrow. Eternity, I felt my body dissolve like foam, my memories sink like anchors, and the last thing I remember before becoming part of the Valkyrie was her face, no longer sad, but free, rising toward the light as I sank. And now I am the one who whispers to intruders, who rocks the ship in storms, who turns lights off in corridors, who protects the secret buried deep below. And I watch the world from behind rusted portholes and wonder how many others will come seeking answers, how many skeptics will mock the tales before hearing the song, and how many, if any, will choose love over fear, as I once did. Because the sea is patient, the Valkyrie is eternal, and Ion Kapoor, once a man of science, am now its voice, its shadow, its echo in the waves. And this is not a warning, not a ghost story, but a promise that every choice you make echoes beneath the waves forever. And when you hear a song drifting across the dark water on a moonless night, do not follow it, do not search for truth, do not board the ship whose name has been scratched off every registry but still sails unseen. Because the Valkyrie is always hungry, always waiting. And now that I have taken my place among the drowned, it is your name the sea is whispering next. And now that I dwell in this timeless steel coffin drifting between dimensions of the living and the dead, I understand what no human on land could ever comprehend, that the sea is not merely water or weather but a sentient, shifting soul of forgotten gods and drowned love. And the Valkyrie, this cursed vessel, is their altar, their weapon, their eternal womb for souls too burdened to die and too broken to live. And I have learned its every groan, every rusted breath, every memory, carved into its bones. And among these endless halls I see them all, the old crew who first vanished in 1972, still wandering, still crying, some unaware they are dead, replaying their final moments in loops like broken records, their eyes hollow, their mouths mouthing apologies to no one. And others like me, who remember everything, who ache with the weight of choices that shattered fates. And we, the aware, have become custodians of this ship's endless hunger, tasked not with cruelty but with rituals, singing the lullaby in silence, collecting the echoes of those who board with doubt and leave with dread. And we whisper their names into the storm so that the sea knows whom to take next. And still, some fools come, dreamers, adventurers, lovers, treasure seekers, or the simply cursed, drawn by the scent of the sea and the myth of Valkyrie's return. And among them, sometimes, one comes who reminds me of myself, eyes wide with belief in science, heart guarded like a fortress. And I almost wish to warn them, to hold their hand like Lara held mine, to beg them to turn back, but the ship won't allow it. The ship decides who stays, who breaks, who joins. And I have seen the ship shift its very corridors to trap a man in endless loops, to show a woman her dead child walking through fire, to make a boy write poetry in blood until his voice is gone. And when they break hand, they always break the ship, drinks in their fear like wine, sealing it into the very rust on its rails. And the longer you stay aboard, the less you remember what land feels like, what sunlight feels like, and your memories become distorted, replaced by whispers, until all that remains is the rhythm of the sea, the song of the dead, and the heat of guilt that never cools. And yet, in this place of damnation, I have found one truth more horrifying than anything else, that the Valkyrie is growing, expanding her reach beyond the sea, reaching into dreams, into radios, into tides lapping at coastal towns, calling, always calling. And people are starting to disappear from shores now, from fishing boats and private yachts and even island villages, their stories vanishing with them. And I know that this is just the beginning, that the ship is not merely cursed, but chosen by something far older than death, something that has waited beneath the ocean since before history, a force that used to be worshipped as a god and now feeds on lost love and unburied guilt. And I have seen glimpses of its ties beneath the keel, larger than ships, burning with hate and heartbreak, speaking not in words but thunder and rot. This force speaks through the Valkyrie, uses it as a body, and now I see why I was spared, why I was chosen, not just to suffer, but to warn, to tell the story before it's too late, before others are taken, because unlike the others aboard, I have found a way to reach out through static, through broken signals, through midnight frequencies on shortwave radios, and maybe that's how you're hearing this now. Maybe that's why you found this message, not by chance but by invitation. And if you've heard the name Valkyrie before in dreams, or found water in your shoes, though you never went near a shore, or if a photograph in your drawer suddenly has seaweed draped over it, know this: you've already been marked. The ship already knows you, and you may try to ignore it, deny it, even move far inland, but it's only a matter of time before you feel the call, the pull, the need to understand the mystery. And you will search, and in your search, you will find Dock 17 or its mirror in another port, and you will board it, and you will say, "It's just a ship," and then the lights will flicker, and you'll hear her voice, Lara's voice, soft, melodic, full of longing, and you'll follow her like I did, and the cycle will begin again. And now that you are still listening, still reading, still breathing in the chill of these words that were never meant to be spoken aloud, I must tell you the final truth, the truth I have held even from the ship itself, the memory I kept, buried in the deepest corner of my rotting mind, because it is the only part of me that still belongs to the world of the living. There is one door on the Valkyrie that even she fears, a rusted iron hatch beneath the stern with no handle, no bolts, no markings, only the constant weeping sound of water behind it and the presence of something that was never human. And once, just once, I opened it not with strength or tools or force, but with a whisper, a name that came to me in a dream, spoken by a child with no eyes and bleeding gums. And when the hatch creaked open, the cold behind it was not of this world, it was the absence of warmth itself, a place where time shattered and light bent like broken bones, and I saw them, the first ones, the true crew, the ones who found something ancient beneath the seafloor on that doomed expedition, something glowing and alive, something they tried to bury but instead brought back aboard, thinking it was knowledge or salvation, but it was hunger, it was grief given form. And that thing, whatever it was, attached itself to the ship's keel like a leech to a heart and turned the vessel into a temple, a cage, and a predator all at once. And the crew, they didn't die, not truly, they were folded into it, screaming forever, their pain powering the storm, their broken dreams forming the walls of this floating nightmare. And as I stood there watching this horror, this endless ocean of writhing souls, I realized something terrifying, that Lara wasn't taken by the ship, she chose to stay. Because she remembered before I did, she understood the cost before I could, and she believed that love could cleanse even this monstrous fate, and perhaps she was right, because even now, I feel her presence not as a ghost but as a force keeping the ship from fully crossing over into our world. And the moment her essence fades, the Valkyrie will no longer need to hide in fog or dreams, it will rise, fully, in daylight, onto shores, into cities, into lives, and it will not ask permission, it will take. And this is why I speak still. Why I send this message like a bottle across a black ocean of ignorance, because someone must carry the warning. Someone must remember our names. And if you've heard this, if your soul has stirred at these words, then perhaps it is you, not me, who will finish what I began, not by boarding the ship, but by destroying the one thing that holds her together, the anchor that sits at the bottom of the trench where this all began. Made not of steel but of bone and ash and betrayal, forged from the remains of a god who wept so long that the sea was born from his sorrow. And only fire born of love and sacrifice can melt it. Only the blood of one who chose the sea willingly can break the chain. And I no longer have blood, only memory, only voice. But you who still breathe, who still dream, who still weep for things you do not understand, you might, just might, be the last hope, the one spark of warmth in this freezing infinity. And I beg you, whoever you are, if you feel her in your dreams, if you hear the lullaby and the hum of your fan, if you see a girl standing barefoot at your window dripping salt water on the sill, do not run, do not scream, but ask her for the name of the anchor. And when she gives it to you, write it in blood, burn it into your skin, scream it into the sea, and then go, take a boat alone, go to the trench, dive without fear, and throw that name into the fire of your breath and your last heartbeat. And maybe, just maybe, the ship will sink for the last time, and I will finally sleep. Lara will finally smile, and the sea will go quiet for the first time in centuries. And if not, if you fail, then the tide will rise, the coastlines will sing, and the Valkyrie will not haunt one man's dreams but all mankind, forever. And as I drift now between moments, not alive and not yet gone, caught in the slow eternal heartbeat of the sea that remembers everything, I begin to understand the full shape of the curse, not as punishment, but as a cycle of choices, of love interrupted, of souls tethered not by chains but by memory. Because even after the warning has been spoken, even after the name of the anchor has been whispered into fire, the sea still listens, still waits for someone else to forget, to defy, to love too deeply or grieve too hard. And that's how it begins again. Always again, with a kiss given too late, a secret never spoken, a promise left to rot beneath the tide. And I see now that the Valkyrie is not just a ship, it is every heartbreak ever drowned, every letter sunk to the bottom of the world, every ghost of those who waited at the shore for someone who never came back. And perhaps that's why she called to me, why she chose me, because I too left someone behind once, long before Lara, long before the sea touched me, a girl named Sana I loved when I was young, who used to sit with me by the river in our village and speak of becoming stars. And one day, I left without telling her, chasing dreams. And years later I heard she waited for me every day until her heart gave out by the water, and I never went back, never faced the grave, never said goodbye. And maybe that's where the ocean first marked me. Maybe my debt began not with the Valkyrie but with a quiet girl by a river. And now that I am what I am, a shadow, a whisper, a story no one believes, I feel them all, the left behind ones, the voices that fill this ship with longing, and I cannot scream loud enough to silence them, cannot stop the cycle unless someone out there listens, really listens. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're reading this now not because you're curious but because something already stirs in your blood, something old, something salt-washed. And maybe that's why tonight, as the tide rises and the stars disappear behind a wall of moving fog, you feel afraid for no reason, feel watched, feel wet footprints outside your locked door. Because the Valkyrie chooses carefully but relentlessly, and once you've been seen, once your name has been hummed by the drowned, there is no turning back. And I don't know how long this message will reach you, whether in dream or drift, whether on tape or tangled in your thoughts like seaweed. But I beg you, if you love someone, tell them now. If you've hurt someone, find them. Because regret is the truest bait the sea knows, and the moment your heart cracks open with the weight of what you never said, the ship will smell it, and then the song will start again, and the fog will come, and Dock 17 will appear where there was only grass, and you will walk toward it thinking this is a story, this is a myth, this is not real, and yet your feet will carry you forward, and your hands will reach the ramp, and you will climb aboard and find the deck cold and silent and strangely familiar, and you will call out hello, and no one will answer but a voice in your own head saying, welcome home. And then the lights will flicker and the storm will rise and the doors will shut behind you. And you'll remember this story too late. And I will be watching, wishing I could save you, wishing love was enough to stop the sea from taking everything it wants. But I've learned now that the sea doesn't want love, it wants the proof of it, the wound of it, the raw and unfinished pieces of people who loved too hard or too little. And when it finds them, it turns them into song. And when it sings, the world forgets a little more. Until one day no one remembers that the ship ever vanished, that Lara ever lived, that I ever screamed, that the river girl ever waited, and all that remains is the sound of waves crashing against your window, whispering your name with every pull of the tide. And when you finally stand at the water's edge, eyes closed, arms open, thinking of someone you lost and never got to say goodbye to, that's when you'll see it in the fog, the Valkyrie, majestic and rusted, still floating, still waiting, still singing. And so, as the ship glides silently through the waters no map dares name, powered not by engines but by the breath of sorrow and memory, I watch as time folds in upon itself, and I see you not as you are, but as you will be, standing barefoot on the edge of some forgotten dock, staring into the mist with a question in your heart you cannot speak aloud. And I want to warn you, want to reach through the cold veil that separates us and place my hand on your shoulder and whisper, turn back, it is not too late. But the sea does not allow interference, only observation. And I realize now that even Lara, whose soul was once the brightest star in the black galaxy of this ship, is beginning to fade, her form flickering like old film, her voice harder to hear even in the sacred corridors where memory lives. And I know what that means. The anchor is weakening, the seal is breaking, and the Valkyrie is preparing to rise not just as a ship but as a gate, a mouth through which all forgotten sorrows will pour into the waking world. And there is a storm, coming not of wind or rain, but of grief. And when it hits, no one will see it, no one will know it. They will only feel the heaviness in their hearts, the sudden urge to look back at a lost love, to open that old box of letters, to walk into the water without knowing why. And that is how it feeds, how it expands, because the Valkyrie is no longer limited to the ocean, it lives in regret, and regret is everywhere. And I see now that the next chosen one may not even need to step aboard to become part of the story. They may simply remember too deeply, ache too sharply, and that alone will be enough to open the door again. And perhaps that's why I was allowed to send this message. Why the ship, the sea, the curse, let me speak because it wants to be heard. Now wants its song to spread beyond sailors and wanderers, wants lovers and liars and lost children to carry its lullaby like a seed in the wind. And I feel it growing even now, this ache, this awareness. And I wonder if that's how it always starts, with a whisper, a forgotten face in a crowd, a song you hum without knowing where you learned it. And maybe that's what happened to me long before I ever boarded the Valkyrie. Maybe I had already heard its echo in my childhood nightmares, already walked its decks in forgotten dreams, already belonged to it by the time I took my first breath. And if that is true, if the ship is part of something larger, something circular and eternal and stitched into the soul of mankind, then All of this my story, Lara's sacrifice, the anchor in the trench. The drowned singing beneath the hull is not the end, not even the beginning, but a single heartbeat in the endless chest of the ocean. And now that I have told you everything, now that my voice grows thin and the ship begins to hum with the arrival of new names, I feel myself dissolving again into the metal, becoming mist, becoming whisper, and before I go, before my words vanish like fog at sunrise, I leave you with this love while you still can. Forgive what you cannot forget. Speak the names of your dead with warmth instead of silence, because when the day comes that the sea calls you, and it will, your choices will decide whether you drown or become the lighthouse in someone else's storm. And if you should ever see a girl standing at the shore with wind in her hair and sorrow in her eyes, ask her if her name is Lara. And if she nods, take her hand and listen, really listen, because in that moment, you will know that the Valkyrie that has chosen a gander, that this time, perhaps, the ending can finally change. And now that I am almost no longer I, now that my name drifts like ash through the ship's rusted pipes and my memories pulse in the dim lantern light swinging above the captain's table, I feel the presence of others awakening some new, some very old, drawn not just to the ship itself but to the story of the ship, as if the Valkyrie has become more than metal and shadow, more than salt and storm, but now a myth that breathes, a living tale passed from dream to dream, whispered across bonfires, buried inside lullabies, humming in the silence between crashing waves. And I see now that even as I fade, my story is not ending. For the ship has made me part of its spine, my regrets its marrow, and through me it sings louder, clearer, longer, calling to those whose hearts still burn with loss, those who feel incomplete under full moons, those who cry without knowing why when they stare too long at the horizon. And I see you again, you, yes you, the one still reading, still listening, still feeling this story not with your mind but with something deeper, something aching. And I must tell you now, before I am no longer strong enough to speak, that the Valkyrie is preparing for something different. Something final, not just a claim, not just a curse, but to return, to rise from myth into form, from form into legend, to drift up rivers and through cities, to board your train, your memory, your child's nightmare, because its hunger has grown beyond the sea and now it wants the land. The sky, the very voice of time itself, and it can only be stopped if someone who once loved truly, and lost completely, and forgave endlessly, steps aboard willingly without fear, not to escape or to survive, but to heal. And I thought maybe I was that someone, maybe Lara was that someone, but perhaps neither of us were ready to surrender fully, to give not just our lives but our hate, our guilt, our shame. And that is what the ship waits for, the one who forgives everything, even themselves. And if you are that person, if you carry such a wound, such a story, then perhaps this isn't a curse at all, but an invitation, a dark kind of salvation. And maybe if you board the Valkyrie not to run or to fight, but to understand, then you might not sink, you might walk her decks and light her corridors with memory. You might find Lara where she waits between tides, with the stars in her hair and forgiveness in her voice. And you might reach the door that none of us could open, the one sealed by the first betrayal. And you might speak the name buried in the ship's anchor, the name even the sea forgets. And if you do, if you truly remember what it means to love someone more than you fear the dark, then the ship might finally shudder and break and sink, not with screams, but with a sigh, a release, and all the ghosts would rise like steam into the sky. And I would thank you with my last whisper, and drift with the others into peace, into stillness, into the gentle silence beyond storms, where no ship sails, and no song lingers, and all that remains is a calm sea and the warmth of a memory finally set free. And so as I dissolve into what the ship has made of me, as I become less of a soul and more of a tide, I realize with a hollow kind of peace that I was never the hero of this story, that the Valkyrie does not need heroes, it needs truth, and truth is never clean, never noble, it is soaked in blood and wrapped in regret. It speaks through nightmares and salt and the wet breath of things forgotten. And now, beneath this ship's eternal hull, I feel them, the ancient ones, not ghosts, not demons, but witnesses, waiting beneath the keel in silence, older than language, eyes like dying suns, their voices like pressure crushing ribs. And they have always been there, always watching, always feeding, not on flesh but on the stories we never told, the apologies we buried in our throats, the kisses that died on cold lips. And it is through our silence that they survive. It is through our shame that they grow stronger. And the Valkyrie, she is their vessel, their cathedral of sorrow. And I was merely the bell that rang once to say someone remembered. But memory is not enough to stop what is coming, not anymore, because I feel the ship changing again, not shifting through the fog as it always did, but rising higher than it ever has, drawn not just to one person's grief, but to all of it, as if the entire world has become heavy with unspoken hurt, as if the hearts of a billion people beating with disappointment and loneliness have created a new ocean for her to sail. And the fog is no longer fog but breath, the breath of every soul that ever whispered, I wish I had said goodbye. And I hear it now, the horn of the Valkyrie, long and slow and deep, echoing across plains and deserts and cities where no sea should reach. And people stop and look up, confused, because they don't know why the sound breaks their hearts, don't know why it feels like something they forgot has returned. But it has come back through me, through Lara, through all who stepped aboard and never returned. And I wonder if this is what the end of the world looks like, not fire or flood, but memory rising like a wave too tall to escape. And all I can do now, as my voice finally begins to vanish into the iron bones of the ship, is to hope that you, whoever you are, wherever you are, who heard me, who stayed with me, who felt this not just as a story but as a truth, will be brave enough to speak the things you've buried. Forgive yourself before the sea comes to collect what you did not say. Because the only thing that holds back the Valkyrie's final voyage is love that was spoken, pain that was released, and healing that did not wait too long. And if you can do that, if enough of you can, then maybe, just maybe, she will go back to sleep beneath the waves, and I will go with her, and Lara will finally rest, and the world will not end in sorrow, but in silence. A silence so peaceful, so clean. It feels like the breath after a song ends.